What happens when a species that barely invented faster than light travel 3 centuries ago suddenly appears at the doorstep of a galactic empire that has ruled the stars for 10,000 years? What occurs when primitive humans, who should be struggling with basic space colonization, somehow bypass every known law of physics and military doctrine that has kept the galaxy stable for millennia? The Silithian Dominion had conquered over 47 star systems, enslaved dozens of species, and perfected the art of galactic warfare. Their technology was unmatched, their strategies flawless, and their victory inevitable. Every species they encountered followed the same predictable pattern: initial resistance, desperate last stands, and eventual submission to superior force. But humans were different. They didn't play by the rules. They didn't follow conventional tactics. And somehow, impossibly, they were winning battles they had no right to survive, using technology that shouldn't exist, and displaying capabilities that defied every scientific principle the galaxy had established over thousands of years of warfare. This is the story of how Earth's children turned the known universe upside down, and why the phrase, "that's impossible for human technology," became the most feared words in the galaxy. Because when humans refuse to accept that something is impossible, the universe itself seems to bend to their will. Welcome to humanity's first galactic war, where being underestimated proved to be the greatest weapon of all. Admiral Vexthar stood on the command bridge of the Dominion flagship Eternal Conquest, his forearms crossed behind his back as he gazed through the massive viewport at the small blue planet spinning lazily in the void. The third planet of what the inhabitants called the Sol system looked utterly unremarkable. Primitive electromagnetic emissions, basic chemical propulsion signatures, and energy readings that barely registered on their most sensitive instruments. "Initial scans complete, Admiral," reported Commander Gilak from her station. Her chitinous exoskeleton reflected the blue glow of the bridge displays as she manipulated the holographic interface. The species appears to be in early spacefaring development. They have established small colonies on their system's fourth planet and several orbital installations. Technology level appears consistent with Class 7 primitive civilizations. Admiral Vexthar's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The Silithian Dominion had been expanding through this spiral arm of the galaxy for over 3,000 years, and they had encountered hundreds of species at similar development levels. The pattern was always the same: demonstrate superior firepower, demand submission, integrate useful technology and populations into the Dominion, eliminate resistance. Simple, efficient, effective. "Any signs of faster-than-light capability?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The probe data clearly showed these humans were still using chemical rockets for their pathetic interplanetary ventures. "Negative, Admiral. No FTL signatures detected. No quantum field manipulators, no dimensional tunnel generators. They appear to be limited to sublight propulsion." Gilak paused, reviewing additional data streams. "However, there are some unusual energy signatures coming from several of their installations. The computer cannot categorize them within known technological frameworks." Vexthar's attention sharpened slightly. In his 800 years of military service, he had learned that unusual energy signatures sometimes indicated nascent technologies that could prove valuable to the Dominion. Not that it mattered for the conquest itself, but useful innovations could always be extracted later. "Deploy first contact protocols," he ordered. "Standard intimidation pattern. We will demonstrate our superiority, demand their immediate surrender, and begin integration procedures." Estimated completion time? "Based on historical data for similar civilizations, Admiral, complete pacification should require no more than 7 standard rotations," came the reply from the tactical station. The Eternal Conquest was a marvel of Dominion engineering, stretching nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was crafted from quantum-stabilized metallic compounds that could withstand the fury of dying stars. Its weapon systems could crack planets in half, and its defensive shields could deflect the combined firepower of entire fleets. Accompanying it were 12 destroyer-class vessels and 48 fighter squadrons, a force capable of sterilizing worlds. As the fleet moved into Earth's orbital space, the human response was exactly what they expected from a primitive species encountering superior technology for the first time. Panicked communications flooded the electromagnetic spectrum. Primitive defense satellites oriented toward the Dominion fleet with weapons that couldn't possibly penetrate even their lightest shielding. Several chemical propulsion interceptors launched from various surface installations, accelerating toward the fleet at speeds that seemed almost comically slow to beings accustomed to near-light velocity combat. "Admiral, we're receiving communications from the planet," reported the communications officer. "Multiple sources, multiple languages. The universal translator is processing. Translation complete. They're requesting our intentions and offering diplomatic contact." This, too, was standard. Every species tried diplomacy first. It never worked, of course, but Vexstar had learned that allowing primitives to exhaust their peaceful options often made the eventual conquest proceed more smoothly. "Open a channel," he commanded. "Let them see what they're facing." The main display shifted to show the command bridge in all its imposing glory. Vexstar positioned himself at the center, his towering 3-meter frame enhanced by ceremonial armor that gleamed with embedded technological augmentations. His species, the Zilithians, had evolved as apex predators on a high-gravity world, and their natural intimidation factor had proven invaluable in diplomatic situations. When the human faces appeared on his screen, they looked so soft, so fragile. Bipedal mammals with skin that appeared paper-thin and eyes that betrayed obvious fear despite their attempts at composure. The primary spokesperson appeared to be an older human with graying fur on his head and primitive optical enhancement devices. "I am Admiral Vexstar of the Zilithian Dominion," he began, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that his species used to project dominance. "Your system now falls under Dominion authority. You will cease all military activities, provide complete technological databases, and prepare for integration into our empire. Compliance will ensure the survival of your species." The elderly human's expression remained remarkably steady as he replied, "I'm President Morrison of the United Earth Federation. We appreciate your contact, Admiral, but we cannot accept your terms. Earth is our home, and we will not submit to foreign rule." Vexstar's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand the nature of this situation, President Morrison. This is not a negotiation. Your primitive weapons cannot threaten our vessels. Your chemical propulsion systems cannot evade our hunter squadrons. Surrender now, and your species will be granted positions within our empire appropriate to your capabilities." "We understand you believe you have overwhelming advantages, Admiral," Morrison replied calmly, "but humans have a saying, never underestimate your opponent. I strongly recommend you reconsider your approach." The audacity was almost refreshing. Vexstar had conquered species with far more advanced technology who had surrendered after a single demonstration of Dominion firepower. These humans appeared to suffer from the kind of primitive tribal thinking that made conquered species difficult to manage initially. "Very well," Vexstar said. "Perhaps a demonstration is required. Tactical, select a military target on the planet's surface, something significant enough to illustrate our capabilities but not so important as to cripple their infrastructure unnecessarily. Admiral, targeting the installation their communications indicate is their primary military coordination facility. Location: North American continent, sector designated Pentagon by local nomenclature. Fire: the Eternal Conquest's primary beam weapon, a focus stream of antimatter-enhanced plasma capable of vaporizing battlecruisers lanced downward toward Earth's surface. The weapon had never failed to achieve complete target destruction in its 3 centuries of service. It struck some kind of barrier 50 kilometers above the planet's surface and dissipated harmlessly. Every being on the command bridge froze. In the sudden silence, only the background hum of ship systems could be heard. "Report!" Vexstar's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Admiral, our sensors indicate the weapon functioned perfectly. Full power, optimal focus, direct targeting. But something deflected it. Not absorbed, not blocked, deflected. The energy pattern suggests the tactical officer paused, checking and rechecking his readings. Admiral, the energy pattern suggests the beam was redirected through dimensional space, but that's impossible. They don't have dimensional manipulation technology. On the screen, President Morrison's expression had shifted slightly. Was that the beginning of a smile? Admiral Morrison said calmly. I tried to warn you. Humans don't surrender easily, and we've had some time to prepare for this day. Now, I believe it's our turn to demonstrate our capabilities. Before Vexthar could respond, every alarm on the ship began sounding simultaneously. Multiple contacts appearing throughout the fleet formation, Tactical reported, his voice rising in pitch. Ships materializing directly within our defensive perimeter. Admiral, they're appearing inside our shield formations. The main tactical display lit up with red contact markers as human vessels seemed to step out of empty space directly among the Dominion fleet, but these weren't the primitive chemical propulsion craft they had detected earlier. These ships were sleek, angular, and moving with impossible precision through three-dimensional space. How many? Vexthar demanded. 100, 200, Admiral, they're still appearing. Current count is over 400 vessels ranging from frigate to battleship classifications. And, Admiral, the tactical officer's voice cracked slightly, they're not using any propulsion signatures we can detect. No ion drives, no plasma jets, no quantum tunneling. They're moving through space as if inertia doesn't affect them. A new voice cut across the communications channel. This one belonged to a younger human wearing what appeared to be a military uniform. Admiral Vexthar, this is Fleet Admiral Chen of the United Earth Space Force. You've just experienced our planetary defense grid, powered by technology you don't understand. The ships now surrounding your fleet represent just the first response wave. I'm going to give you the same opportunity you offered us. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated according to the laws of war. Vexthar's four hands clenched into fists. No species had ever spoken to a Dominion admiral in such terms. You dare threaten the Zalithian Dominion? Our empire spans 47 star systems. Our technology has conquered the galaxy for 10,000 years. Your primitive species has barely left its birth planet. Our primitive species, Admiral Chen replied evenly, has been preparing for this meeting for longer than you might think. We've been monitoring your expansion through this sector for the past 50 years. We've studied your tactics, your technology, and your weaknesses. And we've developed countermeasures. 50 years? That was impossible. The Dominion's own long-range scouts had surveyed this system only 200 years ago and found nothing but pre-industrial civilization. How could a species advance from bronze tools to interstellar capability in such a short time? Admiral? Came an urgent report from the sensor station. I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the human fleet. Whatever weapon systems they're charging, the power signatures are unlike anything in our databases. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving into what looked like attack formation. But their movement patterns were all wrong. They weren't following any known principles of space combat. Ships were changing direction instantaneously without apparent regard for momentum or gravitational fields. Some appeared to be moving backward through time, arriving at their destinations before they had started moving. "Weapons charged and ready, Admiral," reported the tactical officer. "Shall we engage?" Vexthar stared at the display, his strategic mind racing through possibilities. The humans had demonstrated technology that shouldn't exist. Their ships moved in ways that violated basic physics. They had deflected the Dominion's most powerful weapon as if it were a child's toy. And they had somehow achieved all of this while appearing to be a primitive species just moments ago. Every instinct developed through centuries of conquest told him to attack immediately, to bring the full force of Dominion technology to bear before the enemy could consolidate whatever impossible advantages they possessed. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that perhaps, for the first time in his military career, he was facing something he didn't understand. "Admiral Chen," he said slowly, "what exactly are we dealing with here?" Chen's expression was unreadable. We're dealing with a species that refuses to accept limitations, Admiral. Humans have a particular talent for making the impossible merely improbable. Your empire has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years because every species you've encountered has accepted that your technology represents the pinnacle of what's achievable. We don't accept that assumption. But your development level, Vexthar began, was carefully managed to appear primitive to any observers, Chen finished. We've known about your empire since your first scout probes reached our system. We've been preparing ever since. And one thing we learned very quickly is that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to make sure your opponent doesn't know they're in one until it's too late.
The communication channel remained open, carrying silence that stretched across the void between fleets.
Around them, space itself seemed to hold its breath as two civilizations faced each other across a gap that represented far more than simple distance. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke again. Admiral Vexthar, we're going to give you one more chance to withdraw peacefully. Leave this system, return to your empire, and inform them that Earth is under human protection. Any future contact must be initiated through proper diplomatic channels. Vexthar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. And if we refuse? Chen's smile was not reassuring. Then you'll discover exactly how impossible human technology can be, Admiral. And I don't think that's a lesson your empire is prepared to learn today. The Eternal Conquest's bridge fell silent except for the soft whisper of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Outside the viewports, human ships continued their impossible dance through space, moving like nothing Vexthar had ever seen in 8 centuries of military service. For the first time since he had assumed command of the Dominion's expansion fleets, Admiral Vexthar found himself facing a tactical situation for which his training had not prepared him. He was about to discover that this would not be the last time humans surprised him. Admiral Vexthar had made his decision. Despite the impossible technology the humans had displayed, the Zilithian Dominion had not conquered 47 star systems by retreating from the unknown. Whatever tricks these primitives had developed, they were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned by proven military doctrine. All ships' battle stations, he commanded. Target the nearest human vessels. Prepare for full engagement. Show them what 10,000 years of galactic conquest has taught us about warfare. The response from his fleet was immediate and coordinated. 12 destroyer-class vessels moved into attack formation while 48 fighter squadrons deployed in hunting patterns that had proven effective against every enemy they had ever encountered. The Eternal Conquest itself began charging its main battle array, weapon systems that could level continents. Admiral Chen, Vexthar announced across the open channel, you have made a grave error. Perhaps your species will learn wisdom from the ashes of your homeworld. Admiral Vexthar, came the calm reply. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this. Our preference was always peaceful first contact. But humans have another saying you should know about. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists across the galaxy for centuries to come. The human fleet didn't scatter or take defensive positions as every other species had done when facing Dominion firepower. Instead, they simply stopped. Every human ship, from the smallest frigate to the massive battleships, became perfectly motionless relative to local space. Not drifting, not maintaining position with thruster adjustments. Completely, impossibly still. Then they began to change. Admiral, the sensor officer called out, his voice tight with confusion. The human ships are restructuring themselves. Their hull configurations are shifting. It's as if they're transforming into completely different vessels. On the main display, Vexthar watched in fascination and growing alarm as sleek human warships began unfolding like impossible origami. Hull plates separated and rearranged themselves, revealing internal structures that defied every principle of starship engineering he had ever learned. Weapons emplacements emerged from what had appeared to be empty space. Shield generators materialized in configurations that should have been physically impossible to maintain. Sir, Tactical reported, Their power signatures are increasing exponentially. Previous readings indicated standard military-grade reactors. Current readings suggest, Admiral, they're drawing power directly from quantum vacuum fluctuations. That's purely theoretical technology. Nobody has ever made it practical. Continue the attack, Vexthar ordered grimly. Whatever the humans were doing, the Dominion's weapons had never failed to destroy enemy vessels regardless of their defensive capabilities. The first salvo from the Dominion fleet was devastating. Antimatter torpedoes, plasma beams, and gravitational disruptors lanced across space toward the transforming human ships. It was enough firepower to reduce a moon to constituent atoms. Every weapon struck some kind of barrier and simply stopped. Not exploded, not deflected. They hung in space for a moment, suspended in fields of crackling energy, and then began moving backward along their original trajectories. "Evasive maneuvers!" Vexthar shouted, but it was too late. The Eternal Conquest and its escort fleet found themselves dodging their own weapons as antimatter torpedoes and plasma beams returned with perfect accuracy to their points of origin. Only desperate maneuvering and the activation of emergency defensive systems prevented the Dominion fleet from being destroyed by its own firepower. "Report!" Vexthar demanded as his flagship shuddered under the impact of its own redirected weapons against its shields. "Admiral, they didn't just deflect our attacks," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking slightly. "They reversed them. Completely. Every weapon we fired returned to its point of origin with identical force characteristics. Our sensors can't explain how they accomplished this." On the communications channel, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of regret. "We tried to warn you, Admiral. Human defensive technology is based on different principles than what your Empire uses. We don't just stop attacks, we return them to sender." But even as Chen spoke, the transformed human fleet was demonstrating offensive capabilities that were equally impossible. The nearest human battleship, now configured in a shape that resembled a three-dimensional star more than a traditional spacecraft, simply pointed one of its extended projections toward a Dominion destroyer. There was no visible weapon discharge, no energy beam, no projectile launch. The destroyer ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized. One moment it was a kilometer-long warship with a crew of 3,000 beings. The next moment there was empty space where it had been. No debris, no energy signature, no indication that anything had ever occupied that location. "Tactical, report on the destroyer Vengeance," Vexthar ordered. "Admiral, there's nothing to report. It's gone. Not destroyed, just gone. As if it never existed. Sensors show no trace of the ship or its crew. Across the fleet formation, similar impossibilities were occurring. Human ships were targeting Dominion vessels with weapons that operated outside any known physical principles. Some ships were being transported elsewhere in the galaxy instantaneously. Others found their internal systems rewriting themselves, converting Dominion technology into something else entirely. One destroyer reported that its entire crew had been transported safely to Earth's surface while their ship simultaneously became a flowering garden suspended in vacuum. "Admiral," the communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "I'm receiving reports from across the fleet. The humans aren't actually destroying our ships. They're changing them, converting them into things that shouldn't be able to exist. The crew of the Relentless reports that their ship is now a living organism that's asking them what they'd like for dinner." Vexthar stared at the tactical display as red contact markers representing his fleet began transforming into symbols his computer couldn't categorize. In 8 centuries of military service, across dozens of campaigns against species ranging from hive-minded insects to energy beings, he had never encountered anything like this. "What kind of technology are you using?" he demanded across the open channel. Admiral Chen's response was prompt and infuriatingly calm. "We call it applied impossibility, Admiral. Humans have a particular talent for refusing to accept that something can't be done. When we discovered your empire was expanding toward our system, we didn't just develop weapons to fight you. We developed ways to make warfare itself irrelevant." "That's not possible," Vexthar snarled. Physical laws are universal constants. Matter and energy follow predictable patterns throughout the galaxy. Your species cannot simply ignore the fundamental forces of nature, can't we? Chen replied. Admiral, your entire empire is based on the assumption that superior technology inevitably defeats inferior technology. That overwhelming force guarantees victory. That the universe operates according to rules that favor the strong over the weak. What if those assumptions are wrong? As if to emphasize the point, another human ship, this one resembling a crystalline structure that folded in and out of visible dimensions, approached the Eternal Conquest directly. Vexthar ordered his gunners to concentrate all firepower on the approaching vessel. Every weapon that fired at the human ship instead struck a Dominion fighter that had been in an entirely different location moments before. The fighter pilots reported that they were unharmed, but were now flying ships made of what appeared to be solid music. Our weapons can't target them, Tactical reported desperately. Every time we lock onto a human ship, our targeting systems redirect to our own vessels. It's as if space itself is protecting them. The crystalline human ship moved to within a few hundred meters of the Eternal Conquest's hull and simply stopped, hanging in space like a geometric impossibility made manifest. Admiral Chen's voice came through crystal clear on all channels. Admiral Vexthar, we're going to offer you something no species in the galaxy has ever received from humans before. We're going to give you a choice. What kind of choice? Vexthar asked, his strategic mind racing through options that grew fewer with each passing moment. You can continue fighting us, Chen explained. In which case, we'll demonstrate additional capabilities that will make what you've already seen seem mundane by comparison. We can remove your fleet from this reality entirely, or transport it to a dimension where the laws of physics are more flexible. We can turn your ships into poetry or convert them into small, furry animals that enjoy being petted. Or, Vexthar asked grimly, or you can accept that you've encountered something genuinely new in the galaxy, something that doesn't fit the patterns your empire has relied upon for 10,000 years. You can choose to be the first Dominion admiral to return home with news that expansion in this direction is inadvisable. Around the fleet, human ships continued their impossible dance through space and dimensions. Some appeared to be having conversations with the empty vacuum itself. Others were drawing pictures in the cosmic background radiation. One had begun teaching a masterclass on interstellar botany to any crew member who cared to listen. This is some kind of illusion, Vexthar said, though his voice carried less conviction than he intended. Advanced holographic technology designed to confuse our sensors. Is it? Chen asked. Computer. Display Admiral Vexthar's service record. Suddenly, Vexthar found himself looking at a perfect reproduction of his military files, including classified information that existed only in the most secure Dominion databases light years away. Personal details, psychological evaluations, strategic assessments, even his private thoughts from his last meditation session. How do you have access to Dominion classified files? He demanded. We don't, Chen replied simply. We just asked the universe to show us who we were dealing with. Turns out the universe is quite chatty when you approach it politely. Would you like to know what it thinks about your empire's expansion policies? That's impossible, Admiral. We've established that impossible is a relative concept where humans are concerned. The question now is whether you're going to adapt to this new reality or continue insisting that reality conform to your expectations. Vexthar looked around his command bridge at officers who had served with distinction in dozens of campaigns. Every one of them was staring at displays showing impossible sensor readings, tactical situations that defied analysis, and weapon systems that reported successful target acquisition on things that couldn't possibly exist. It was being gently, politely, and thoroughly educated about its limitations. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Nothing, Chen replied. We want you to leave. Return to your empire. Tell them that Earth and its surrounding systems are under human protection. Any future contact should be peaceful and diplomatic. And, Admiral, yes, tell them that the age of conquest through superior firepower is ending. There are new players in the galaxy now, and we don't play by the old rules. As Admiral Chen spoke, every human ship in the fleet began to fade from visible existence, not like ships entering hyperspace, but like thoughts being gently forgotten. Within moments, the only evidence of their presence were the converted Dominion vessels, which had been restored to their original configurations with crews intact and unharmed. Vexstar stared at empty space where moments before the most impossible fleet he had ever encountered had demonstrated that everything his empire believed about warfare, physics, and the nature of reality itself might need to be reconsidered. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic expansion, a Dominion admiral was about to return home with news of a species that could not be conquered. The question was whether the Dominion would listen. The council chamber of the Zalithian Dominion had witnessed many historic moments throughout its 10 millennia of existence. Emperors had been crowned within its crystalline walls. Wars had been declared against entire star systems. The fate of countless civilizations had been decided by the beings who gathered around its massive circular table. But never had the chamber hosted a debriefing quite like this one. High Counselor Thisrin, her ancient carapace bearing the scars of 100 conquered worlds, sat at the head of the council table and reviewed Admiral Vexstar's report for the 7th time. Around her, the greatest military minds of the Dominion struggled to process information that challenged every assumption upon which their empire had been built. "Let me ensure I understand correctly, Admiral," Thisrin said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of barely controlled frustration. "You encountered a species that appeared to be primitive. When you attempted standard conquest protocols, they demonstrated technology that operates outside known physical laws. When you engaged them militarily, they returned your weapons to their points of origin and converted your ships into... What was the exact phrase? Admiral Vexstar, standing at attention despite his obvious exhaustion, replied stiffly. The crew of the Relentless reported that their ship became a living organism that asked them what they'd like for dinner, High Counselor. The crew of the Victory found their vessel transformed into what they described as crystallized music that sang lullabies to nearby asteroids. General Krixthor, the Dominion's supreme military strategist, slammed one of his 6 arms against the table. This is obviously some form of advanced psychological warfare. No species can simply ignore the fundamental laws of physics. Matter cannot be converted to music. Ships cannot exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. These humans are using sophisticated illusion technology. We considered that possibility, Vexstar replied carefully. However, our sensor logs have been analyzed by the Technical Institute. The readings are consistent and verifiable. Whatever the humans did to our ships actually occurred at the quantum level. The molecules were genuinely reorganized. The crew of the Relentless brought back biological samples from their converted ship. It was, in fact, a living organism. Admiral Zexenol, commander of the 3rd Battle Fleet, leaned forward in her seat. Admiral Vexstar, I've served alongside you for 3 centuries. Your tactical assessments have never been questioned. But what you're describing violates everything we know about the universe. Are you certain there's no other explanation? Vexstar's mandibles clicked in the pattern that indicated absolute certainty among his species. Admiral Zexenol, I wish there were. But the evidence is undeniable. These humans have developed technology that operates outside conventional physics. They don't just use different tools, they appear to use different rules. High Counselor Thisrin accessed her personal data implants, reviewing strategic assessments that dated back 12,000 years. Every species the Dominion had encountered followed predictable patterns. Superior technology defeated inferior technology. Greater numbers overwhelmed smaller forces. Advanced civilizations conquered primitive ones. These patterns had held constant across thousands of worlds and dozens of galactic sectors. "Show us the tactical recordings," she commanded. The chamber's central holographic display activated, showing the engagement from the perspective of the Eternal Conquest's sensor arrays. The assembled council watched in silence as human ships materialized from empty space, moved without apparent propulsion systems, and casually returned Dominion weapons fire to their points of origin. When the recording showed a Dominion destroyer simply ceasing to exist without any visible cause, several council members visibly flinched. "Computer, analyze the destruction of the destroyer Vengeance," General Krixthor ordered. Analysis complete. The AI system responded. The vessel designated Vengeance did not undergo destruction through conventional means. Molecular scans indicate the ship and crew were relocated to coordinates approximately 12,000 light-years distant, where they now orbit a star in what appears to be a completely peaceful state. The crew reports excellent health and has requested permission to establish a permanent research station to study the local space phenomena. The silence that followed this announcement stretched for nearly a full minute. They transported an entire destroyer across the galaxy instantaneously, Admiral Zexenol said slowly, without causing harm to the crew. Why would they do that instead of simply destroying it? Perhaps, suggested Counselor Velthek, the Dominion's chief xenologist, because their goal was never destruction. The humans appear to have been demonstrating restraint rather than maximum force. They could have eliminated the entire fleet, but chose instead to educate it. This observation caused considerable agitation among the military leaders present. The concept of an enemy deliberately limiting their attacks for educational purposes was not one that fit comfortably within Dominion strategic doctrine. "What do we know about this species?" High Counselor Thysseron asked. "What is their history? Their motivations?" Counselor Velthek accessed his xenological databases. Intelligence reports indicate the humans evolved on a single world in a relatively young star system. They appear to be a recently spacefaring species, having achieved faster-than-light travel only within the past 3 centuries. However, Admiral Vexthar's report indicates they claim to have been monitoring our expansion for 50 years.
"How is that possible if they've only had FTL capability for 3 centuries?
Demanded General Krixthor. "Unknown," Velthek admitted. However, if their technology operates outside conventional physics, as Admiral Vexthar suggests, conventional limitations regarding information transmission and sensor range may not apply to them. Admiral Vexthar cleared his throat respectfully. "High Counselor, there's another aspect of the encounter that requires consideration. The humans offered diplomatic contact. They specifically stated that future interaction should be peaceful and conducted through proper channels." "Diplomatic contact?" Thysseron's voice carried notes of surprise. No species has ever offered the Dominion diplomatic contact after demonstrating superior military capability. Typically, they either surrender immediately or attempt to press their advantage. The humans appear to be different, Vexthar said carefully. Their Admiral Chen indicated that their preference was always peaceful first contact. They seemed genuinely uninterested in conquest or expansion beyond their own system. This information caused considerable discussion around the council table. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had operated under the assumption that any species with superior technology would inevitably become a threat to their empire. Every first contact protocol was designed around this principle. "Perhaps we should accept their diplomatic overture," suggested Counselor Mirfex, the Dominion's chief economic advisor. "If their technology is as advanced as Admiral Vexthar indicates, establishing peaceful relations could provide access to innovations that would benefit the entire empire." "Absolutely not," General Krixthor responded immediately. "We cannot establish precedent that superior technology grants automatic diplomatic immunity. If other species learn that the Dominion will negotiate with anyone who demonstrates sufficient force, our entire expansion strategy becomes untenable." "But General," Counselor Velthek interjected, "our expansion strategy assumes that we possess the most advanced technology in the galaxy. If that assumption is incorrect, perhaps our strategy requires adjustment." The debate that followed consumed the next several hours. Military leaders argued for immediate mobilization of the entire Dominion fleet to overwhelm human defenses through sheer numbers. Diplomatic specialists suggested establishing formal contact to assess human intentions and capabilities. Economic advisors calculated potential benefits and risks of various approaches. Finally, High Counselor Thysseron called for order. "Admiral Vexthar, in your professional opinion, what would be the result if we deployed our full military force against this human system?" Vexthar was quiet for a long moment before answering. High Counselor, based on what I observed, I believe our ships would be gently but firmly relocated to random locations throughout the galaxy. Our crews would be unharmed but thoroughly educated about human capabilities, and we would gain nothing except a demonstration that they can handle larger numbers as easily as they handled our first contact fleet. You believe they could defeat our entire military? High Counselor, I don't think they would defeat our military. I think they would make the entire concept of military conflict irrelevant. They don't appear to fight wars in any conventional sense. They simply make problems go away in ways that leave everyone involved confused but unharmed. General Crixtor stood abruptly. This is unacceptable. The Silithian Dominion has ruled this galaxy for 10 millennia because we have never retreated from a challenge. If we begin negotiating with species that refuse to acknowledge our authority, our empire will collapse within a century. And if we attack a species that can make our ships cease to exist with a thought, Admiral Zexanal countered, our empire will collapse considerably faster than that. High Counselor Thisrin raised a hand for silence. She had spent 800 years making decisions that affected the fate of worlds. She had authorized the conquest of species, the strip mining of planets, and the relocation of entire civilizations. Every decision had been based on clear principles. The strong ruled the weak, superior technology determined outcomes, and the Dominion's expansion was inevitable. Now she faced a decision that challenged every one of those principles. We will proceed with caution, she announced finally. Admiral Vexthar, you will prepare a diplomatic mission to the human system. However, General Crixtar, you will simultaneously begin preparing contingency plans for military action should diplomacy fail. What kind of contingency plans? The general asked. Thisisran's expression was grim. Plans that assume everything we thought we knew about warfare may be wrong. Plans that account for enemies who can ignore physics, redirect our weapons, and transport our ships across the galaxy at will. Plans for fighting a war against an opponent who may be fundamentally impossible to defeat through conventional means. As the council session concluded and the assembled leaders departed to begin implementing their assigned tasks, High Counselor Thisrin remained alone in the chamber, staring at the holographic display that still showed frozen images from the encounter with humanity. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Silithian Dominion was facing an opponent they didn't understand. And for the first time in her 8 centuries of leadership, Thisisran was genuinely uncertain about the outcome. Outside the council chamber, across dozens of worlds and hundreds of space stations, the greatest military machine the galaxy had ever known began preparing for a conflict unlike any they had ever imagined. The question was whether they were preparing for war, diplomacy, or something entirely beyond their experience. In the depths of space, monitoring stations that shouldn't have been able to detect communications across interstellar distances picked up faint transmissions from Earth. The messages were brief, but their content would have been deeply disturbing to any Dominion leader who had been able to decode them. The humans were also preparing, and based on the technical specifications being discussed in their transmissions, what the Dominion had seen during their first encounter represented only a small fraction of human capabilities. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an impossible object. 6 months after the first contact incident, the largest military fleet in galactic history gathered at the edge of the Sol system. High Admiral Thisrin herself commanded the assembled armada from the super-dreadnought Galactic Dominion, a ship so massive it had its own internal gravity generators and carried a crew of nearly 1 million beings. The fleet represented the combined military might of 47 conquered star systems, 5,000 capital ships, 50,000 support vessels, fighter squadrons that numbered in the millions, weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds, shield technology that could withstand the fury of supernovas. It was a force that had never been assembled for a single campaign in the Dominion's 10,000-year history. Admiral, reported Fleet Intelligence Coordinator Vexthal, our deep space monitoring stations have been observing the human system continuously since Admiral Vexthar's initial contact. The energy signatures from their installations have increased by several orders of magnitude. Whatever technology they're using, they appear to be expanding it significantly. High Admiral Thisrin nodded grimly. The diplomatic mission she had authorized had returned with disturbing intelligence. The humans had been polite, friendly, and absolutely immovable in their position that the Sol system was under Earth protection. They had also demonstrated additional technological capabilities that defied analysis by the Dominion's greatest scientific minds. "What is our current assessment of their defensive capabilities?" she asked. "Unknown," Vexthal admitted reluctantly. "Their technology operates outside all known parameters. However, our computer modeling suggests that overwhelming numerical superiority should eventually overcome even the most advanced defensive systems. No technology is infinite in its capabilities." The High Admiral was less certain. Reports from the diplomatic mission included accounts of human representatives casually manipulating fundamental constants of physics during conversations. One diplomat had apparently adjusted the local value of pi to make mathematical calculations more convenient. Another had temporarily reversed entropy in her immediate vicinity to uncool her coffee. "Open a channel to Earth," she commanded. The main display showed the now familiar image of Admiral Chen, still calm and composed despite facing the largest military fleet ever assembled against a single world. "High Admiral Thisrin," Chen said, inclining his head respectfully, "we've been monitoring your fleet's approach. Quite impressive. But I count approximately 5 million individual vessels. That represents a significant commitment of resources." "Admiral Chen," Thisran replied formally, "I am here to offer you one final opportunity for peaceful resolution. The Zalithian Dominion cannot allow any system to exist outside our authority. Submit now, and your species will be integrated into our empire with full privileges." Chen's expression remained unchanged. "High Admiral, we appreciate the offer, but as we explained to your diplomatic mission, Earth's position hasn't changed. We will not submit to foreign rule, and we will defend our system against any aggression. However, I am curious about something." "What? Do you actually believe that sending more ships will produce a different outcome than your first visit?" Thisrin's mandibles clicked in patterns that indicated controlled aggression. "Admiral Chen, you demonstrated impressive technology 6 months ago. But no defensive system is absolute. You are facing a fleet that contains more firepower than most species see in their entire evolutionary history." "That's probably true," Chen agreed amiably. "But High Admiral, you seem to be operating under the assumption that this is a conventional military conflict. What if that assumption is incorrect?" Before Thisron could respond, every sensor operator on the Galactic Dominion began reporting contact signatures throughout the fleet formation. "High Admiral," Tactical reported, "we're detecting approximately 10 million vessels materializing among our forces. They appear to be ships of unknown configuration." The tactical display lit up with more contact markers than its systems had been designed to handle, but these weren't ships in any conventional sense. Some appeared as geometric patterns that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Others looked like crystallized concepts given physical form. A few resembled living organisms the size of battle cruisers, but organisms that clearly existed in multiple realities at once. "Analysis of the new contacts," Thisrin demanded. "High Admiral, our computers cannot categorize them. They don't match any known ship classifications. Some appear to be constructed from materials that don't exist. Others seem to be made of organized probability rather than matter. One appears to be a three-dimensional representation of the mathematical concept of justice." On the communications channel, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of what might have been sympathy. "High Admiral, I want you to understand that what you're seeing represents the human approach to defensive warfare. We don't build more weapons. We build different kinds of possibilities." "What exactly are we looking at?" Thisrin asked. "Those are human ships, High Admiral, but they're human ships that have been designed by humans who refuse to accept conventional limitations on what a ship can be. Some of them exist partially outside normal space-time. Others have been convinced that they're actually something else entirely. A few have been given the ability to rewrite local physics to suit their operational requirements. As Chen spoke, the impossible human fleet began demonstrating capabilities that made their previous technological displays seem mundane by comparison. A ship that appeared to be constructed from pure mathematics began converting Dominion vessels into abstract concepts. The crew of a heavy cruiser reported that their ship had become the theoretical possibility of being a ship, which functioned exactly like being an actual ship except that it occasionally forgot to exist. Another human vessel, this one resembling a flower made of condensed starlight, approached a squadron of Dominion fighters. As it passed through their formation, each fighter was transformed into a different color of the emotional spectrum. The pilots reported that they were unharmed, but their ships now responded to their feelings rather than their control inputs. "This is madness," General Krixthor transmitted from his command ship. "High Admiral, request permission to begin full bombardment immediately. Whatever technology they're using, it cannot possibly work against concentrated firepower from 5 million vessels." "Granted," Thizrin replied. "All ships, open fire. Maximum intensity, all targets." What followed was the most one-sided military engagement in galactic history, though not in the way anyone had expected. 5 million Dominion ships opened fire simultaneously, creating a storm of destructive energy that should have been sufficient to crack planets and ignite stars. The combined firepower represented the accumulated military technology of 10,000 years of galactic conquest. Every weapon discharge was intercepted by human defensive systems that operated on principles that violated every known law of physics. Some weapons were caught by nets woven from crystallized time. Others were absorbed by barriers constructed from compressed empathy. A significant portion were redirected through dimensional shortcuts that caused them to arrive at their targets several billion years before they had been fired, creating temporal paradoxes that the human ships resolved by gently explaining to the universe that consistency was more important than strict causality. But the most disturbing aspect of the human defense was that none of it seemed to require any effort. The impossible ships moved through space with casual grace, treating the most devastating military assault in galactic history as if it were an interesting but ultimately harmless light show. "Admiral Chen," Thizrin called across the communication channel, "what exactly are you?" Chen's response was thoughtful. "We're humans, High Admiral. That's really all there is to it. But being human means something specific. It means we don't accept that something is impossible just because it's never been done before. It means we look at the universe and ask, what if, rather than accepting what is." "But your technology, it violates every known principle of science." "Does it?" Chen asked. "Or does it reveal that what we thought were universal principles were actually just local limitations? High Admiral, your empire has conquered the galaxy using technology that works within established parameters. You've become very good at optimizing known techniques. But humans approach problems differently." As if to demonstrate his point, one of the human ships, a structure that appeared to be built from crystallized curiosity, approached the Galactic Dominion directly. "High Admiral," Tactical reported desperately, "that vessel is moving directly toward our position. All weapons are targeting it, but our targeting systems keep insisting that it doesn't exist even though we can clearly see it." "It doesn't exist," Chen explained helpfully. "It's a ship designed by humans who decided that existing was optional. It chooses to exist when it feels like being useful and stops existing when existence becomes inconvenient. Right now, it's curious about your ship, so it's existing just enough to satisfy its curiosity." The ship of crystallized curiosity reached the Galactic Dominion and simply passed through it. As it did, every crew member on the massive vessel was briefly filled with an overwhelming sense of wonder about the universe and their place in it. Several thousand crew members immediately submitted formal requests for transfer to exploration divisions. Others began composing poetry about the beauty of distant stars. "What did it do to my crew?" Thizrin demanded. "It shared curiosity with them," Chen replied simply. "One of the side effects of human defensive technology is that it tends to leave people with a broader perspective on existence. Your crew members are unharmed, but they may find themselves asking questions they've never considered before." Throughout the fleet, similar encounters were occurring on a massive scale. Human ships were interacting with Dominion vessels in ways that defied military categorization. Some were teaching Dominion crews about advanced mathematics by converting their ship computers into sentient entities that enjoyed solving equations. Others were demonstrating the beauty of three-dimensional music by temporarily converting entire squadrons into living symphonies. "This isn't warfare," General Krickstor transmitted from his flagship, which had been temporarily converted into a mobile philosophy classroom. "This is..." "What is this?" "This is humans being human," Chen answered. "General, your empire has spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of conquest through superior force. But humans have spent the last 3 centuries perfecting the art of making force irrelevant. We don't fight wars by defeating our enemies. We fight wars by helping our enemies realize that war isn't necessary." "That's impossible," General Krickstor. Chen said gently, "You're currently commanding a ship that has been converted into a philosophical discussion about the nature of impossible things. Your crew is having an excellent conversation with the ship's AI about whether reality is mandatory or optional. I think the evidence suggests that impossible is a very flexible concept." High Admiral Thisron looked around her command bridge, which had remained unaffected by human intervention but was reporting tactical situations that her training had never prepared her to handle. Her fleet was not being destroyed. It was being educated, transformed, and gently redirected toward considering perspectives they had never imagined. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "Nothing," Chen replied, and his sincerity was unmistakable. "High Admiral, we want you to take your fleets home. We want you to tell your empire that there are species in the galaxy who have chosen different paths than conquest and expansion. We want you to consider the possibility that strength doesn't have to mean domination." "And if we refuse?" Chen's smile was warm but carried undertones of infinite patience. "Then we'll continue demonstrating that refusal is also a flexible concept. High Admiral, humans have a great deal of experience convincing people to reconsider their positions. We're very, very good at it." As he spoke, human ships throughout the fleet began displaying new capabilities. Reality around Dominion vessels started becoming more flexible. Ships found themselves having conversations with empty space. Crew members discovered they could temporarily exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Several capital ships reported that they had become best friends with nearby asteroids and were planning to start a support group for misunderstood celestial objects. "This is your final warning," Thisron said, though her voice carried less conviction than she intended. "High Admiral," Chen replied gently, "we've been trying to help you understand that warnings aren't necessary. This isn't a conflict where one side wins and the other loses. This is an educational opportunity where everyone learns something new about what's possible. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic dominion, High Admiral Thisron found herself commanding a fleet that was being defeated by kindness, overwhelmed by curiosity, and gently educated about the limitations of force as a solution to complex problems. The war for Earth had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A conflict where the weapon of choice was expanded consciousness and the ultimate victory condition was mutual understanding. The question was whether the Dominion was ready to learn what humans had discovered about the true nature of strength. 1 year after the impossible war that was not a war, High Counselor Thisran stood in her private chambers aboard the Eternal Council, staring out at a sight that would have been unimaginable just 18 months earlier. The Dominion capital world of Zalithia Prime was hosting its first interspecies cultural exchange festival. Throughout the vast cityscape that sprawled across 3 continents, beings from dozens of worlds were sharing technology, art, philosophy, and perspectives that had been impossible under the old conquest-based model of galactic expansion. Markets that had once traded in the spoils of conquered worlds now featured collaborative innovations that emerged when different species worked together rather than competing for dominance. And overseeing it all, with their characteristic blend of impossible technology and infinite patience, were human advisors who had somehow convinced an empire built on 10,000 years of military expansion to voluntarily transform itself into something entirely new. "High Counselor," her aide announced, "Admiral Chen has arrived for your scheduled meeting." Thisran turned from the viewport to greet the human who had become, in the space of a single year, one of the most influential beings in galactic politics. Chen appeared exactly as he had during their first encounter, calm, friendly, and completely unintimidated by surroundings that had witnessed the planning of countless military campaigns. "Admiral Chen," she said, inclining her head in the gesture of respect that had become standard protocol for human interactions. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." "Thank you for extending it, High Counselor," Chen replied, settling into a chair that automatically adjusted itself to accommodate human physiology. "I understand you have some concerns about recent developments." Thisran activated her personal privacy screens, ensuring their conversation could not be monitored by any of the various intelligence services that operated within Dominion space. What she was about to discuss touched on matters that could destabilize everything they had built over the past year. "Admiral, I need to understand something. When your species first demonstrated your capabilities, you claimed you had been monitoring our expansion for 50 years. That would mean you knew about our empire's approach long before we were aware of your existence." Chen nodded. "That's correct. You also demonstrated technology that operates outside all known physical principles. Technology that can manipulate reality itself, reverse the flow of time, and convert matter into abstract concepts. Also correct." Thisran leaned forward, her forearms folded in a gesture that indicated serious inquiry among her species. "Admiral, what I need to know is this. How long have humans possessed these capabilities? And more importantly, how many other species across the galaxy are you currently monitoring?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, and Thisran realized she was witnessing something she had never seen before. A human choosing his words carefully. "High Counselor," he said finally, "that's a very perceptive question, and the answer is complicated." "I have time for complicated answers." Chen stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the festival taking place below. From their vantage point high above the city, they could see representatives from the 47 former Dominion member worlds participating in activities that would have been impossible under the old system. Zilithian scientists were collaborating with Monthari artists to create sculptures that existed in 17 dimensions. Kethmori engineers were working with human technicians to develop transportation systems that operated on principles of applied impossibility. "Humans have always been different," Chen said slowly. "Not because we're more intelligent than other species, or because we're inherently superior. We're different because we have a particular relationship with the concept of impossibility. Explain. Most species, when they encounter something that appears impossible, accept that impossibility as a natural limitation and work within those constraints. They develop technology and social systems that optimize what's achievable within known parameters. This is perfectly logical and has allowed countless civilizations to thrive. But humans don't do this?" Chen turned back to face her. "Humans look at impossibility as a starting point rather than an endpoint. When we encounter something that shouldn't be possible, our first instinct isn't to accept the limitation. It's to ask why the limitation exists and whether it's actually necessary," relating it to everything she had observed about human behavior over the past year. "You're saying that your technology isn't based on advanced scientific principles. It's based on refusing to accept that those principles are absolute."
"Essentially, yes."
What you've classified as impossible technology is actually applied stubbornness. When humans decided that faster-than-light travel was necessary, we didn't invent new physics. We convinced the universe that the speed of light was more of a suggestion than a law. "And your monitoring of our empire?" Chen's expression became more serious. "High Counselor, humans achieved what you might call practical impossibility approximately 200 years ago. Since then, we've been aware of every major civilization within several thousand light-years of Earth. Not because we've been spying, but because once you stop accepting limitations, distance becomes irrelevant. The implications of this statement struck Thisran like physical blows. How many civilizations, currently? We maintain awareness of approximately 12,000 distinct spacefaring cultures within this galactic sector alone. Most of them are at various stages of development. Some are still working toward their first interstellar colonies. Others have established multi-system empires similar to what the Dominion became. 12,000? Voice carried notes of shock that she couldn't suppress. The Dominion believed we were the primary spacefaring civilization in this entire region of space. You were the most expansionist, Chen clarified. But High Counselor, the galaxy is vast. There are countless species that have chosen different approaches to development. Some focus on cultural advancement. Others pursue spiritual enlightenment. Many are simply content to develop sustainable civilizations within their home systems. And they're all aware of each other? Not necessarily. But they're all aware that they're not alone. Humans serve as coordinators, you might say. We help maintain communication and prevent conflicts between species that might not be compatible. We also intervene when civilizations adopt strategies that could destabilize entire regions. The full scope of what Chen was describing began to dawn on Thisran. The Dominion's expansion was stopped because it was becoming a threat to regional stability. Partly, Chen agreed, but also because the Dominion had reached a point where continued expansion through conquest was no longer beneficial to anyone, including the Dominion itself. Your empire was experiencing increasing internal stress. Resource allocation was becoming inefficient. The administrative burden of managing conquered worlds was growing exponentially. Thisran thought about the reports that had crossed her desk during the Dominion's final years of expansion. Internal rebellions requiring increasing military presence. Economic systems strained by the logistics of managing dozens of different planetary cultures. Political instability as conquest-based leadership struggled to transition to governance-based administration. You're saying you didn't stop our expansion to protect other species, you stopped it to protect us. We stopped it because the path you were following was ultimately unsustainable and would have led to the collapse of your civilization within a few centuries. The transformation we help facilitate gives the Dominion a foundation for continued development that could last millions of years. Chen moved back to his chair but remained standing. High Counselor, what humans have learned over the past few centuries is that true strength isn't about the ability to dominate others. It's about the ability to help others achieve their potential. The most successful civilizations aren't the ones that conquer the most territory. They're the ones that create the most value for everyone around them. And the other 11,999 civilizations, do they know about humanity's role in galactic affairs? Some do, others don't. It depends on their needs and development level. Species that are ready for broader galactic contact are introduced to the larger community gradually. Those that aren't ready are given space to develop naturally until they reach appropriate maturity. Thisran sat back in her chair, processing the revelation that everything she thought she knew about galactic civilization was merely one small part of a much larger community that had been carefully managed by a species that appeared to be primitive just 18 months ago. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on what the former Dominion species choose to do," Chen replied. "You've demonstrated that you can transition from conquest-based expansion to collaborative development. That opens opportunities for integration with the broader galactic community. But the choice is yours. And if we choose to return to our previous policies?" Chen's smile was gentle but carried undertones of infinite resources and unshakable resolve. "High Counselor, that option stopped being available the moment you encountered humans. But I don't think you'll choose that path. Why? Because you've seen what collaborative development can accomplish in just 1 year. Your people are healthier, more prosperous, and more fulfilled than they were under the conquest model. Your technology is advancing faster through cooperative research than it ever did through military acquisition. Your culture is richer for having incorporated perspectives from the species you once considered subjects. Chen gestured toward the viewport where the festival continued to showcase innovations that had emerged from voluntary cooperation between species that had once been conquerors and conquered. Most importantly, he continued, your people are happier. Conquest provided temporary satisfaction for a small leadership class, but it created stress and instability for everyone else. Collaboration provides lasting fulfillment for entire civilizations. Thisrin followed his gesture, looking out at her capital city where beings from across the former Dominion were working together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. Scientists collaborating on research that combined the strengths of multiple species. Artists creating works that expressed perspectives no single culture could have conceived. Engineers developing technologies that emerged from the intersection of different approaches to problem solving. Admiral Chen, she said slowly, how many other empires similar to the Dominion have humans assisted in making this transition? Approximately 43 within this galactic sector, Chen replied without hesitation, though each transformation was unique to the specific culture and circumstances involved. 43 empires. High Counselor, conquest-based expansion is a natural stage of development for many spacefaring civilizations. It's not inherently evil, just ultimately inefficient. Most species eventually recognize the limitations of domination-based strategies and transition to cooperative models. Humans simply help that transition occur more smoothly and with less suffering for everyone involved. The scope of human influence across the galaxy was staggering. Thisrin realized she was looking at a species that had quietly and gently guided the development of entire civilizations, preventing conflicts that could have devastated star systems while helping countless cultures achieve sustainable prosperity. What's the ultimate goal? She asked. What are humans working toward? Chen was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried notes of something that might have been wonder. We're working toward a galaxy where every species has the opportunity to develop according to their own values and potential, where conflicts are resolved through understanding rather than force, where the incredible diversity of intelligent life becomes a source of strength rather than a cause for competition. A galactic civilization. Eventually, perhaps, but only if that's what the constituent species choose. The goal isn't unity through uniformity, it's prosperity through diversity. Every species contributes what they do best while benefiting from the strengths of others. Thisrin stood and moved to join Chen at the viewport. Below them, the festival continued, representing just one small example of what became possible when species chose cooperation over conquest. How long before the Dominion species are ready for full integration with the broader galactic community?
That's entirely up to you, Chen replied.
Some species are ready within a few years. Others take decades or centuries to fully transition. There's no pressure and no timeline. The galactic community will be there when you're ready to join it. As they watched, a group of young Zilithians was participating in what appeared to be an art project with human children. They were creating sculptures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously while singing songs in mathematical harmonies that painted pictures in the air. Admiral Chen, Thisrin said quietly, I want to thank you. For what? For showing us that strength doesn't have to mean domination, that impossibility is negotiable, and that the universe is far more wonderful than we ever imagined when we were focused on conquering it. Chen's smile was warm and entirely human. High Counselor, that's what humans do. We help people discover what's possible when they stop accepting limitations as permanent. Outside the viewport, the festival continued, and across the galaxy, 12,000 civilizations pursued their own paths toward development and fulfillment, guided by a species that had learned the greatest secret of all. True power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the capacity to create possibilities that had never existed before. The age of conquest was ending. The age of impossible things becoming everyday realities was just beginning. And somewhere in the depths of space, human ships continued their quiet work of making sure that every species in the galaxy had the opportunity to discover what they could become when someone believed in their potential for greatness. No way, that's human technology. The Galactic Empire stunned. HFY Stories.